We have produced another pathetic, monstrous creature as a result of this phenomenon, known as the male feminist. This is about the most depressingly hilarious creation of modern life. A man who hates himself.
Here's evidence that we see men as hyper agents. He's saying he hates himself, and that makes it funny. Because being a hyper agent, he must be hating himself deliberately, right? Can I point out that Onnesson is an arrogant prick, so I'm not defending him here. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to claim that Onnesson hates himself. Onnesson freaking loves himself. I'm not defending the beliefs of male feminists. I'm going to be defending their humanity. I'm going to be defending their humanity because male feminists may well need our help. They may even need an intervention. And it's very likely that some of them will be coming over to our way of thinking before very long. Moreover, we need to worry about the next generation of male feminists because they've been indoctrinated now. So as I say, this is not about defending their beliefs. We should attack their beliefs. But the human beings that have this mimetic virus that is feminism, they deserve our pity. After all, I've stated before my feelings, but we should see people more as tragic heroes. They're not eminently good. They're just like you and me. And when they suffer more than they deserve through their error of judgment, they should inspire us with pity and empathy. And that's a little bit of fear. Oh my God, that could have been me.
His fellow man so much.
Yeah, he does. He does hate his fellow man. That's why he won't trust his fellow man, because his fellow man is telling him, they're feeding you lies. That's what makes him so powerless. That's what makes him so powerless against the feminist influence. Is he's been taught that his fellow man can't be trusted, that the opinions of his fellow man can't be trusted, because they're just men. What do men know, eh?
That he will say and do and believe literally anything that some dumpy, fat lesbian blogger tells him because he thinks he might get laid. Well,
I think that I had not even reached puberty when I was first indoctrinated into feminism, so I really don't think that getting laid was my motivation. Now, I've got to be fair here, because there's a difference to my mother, who indoctrinated me into a sort of egalitarian feminism, I suppose, although she's quite female supremacist. And the fear-mongering feminists that I sort of fell into the hands of at school, and they were obsessed with rape, obsessed with making it clear that rape was something that could never happen to us. You know that little coda there? I mumbled. I said, the feminism my mother indoctrinated me into was the egalitarian one, and then I mumble. But she was a female, so I spell it. Yeah, actually, that caused many clashes later because she did indoctrinate me in egalitarianism, but she's a female supremacist. So I kind of held her to the egalitarianism that she had indoctrinated me in, for which she kind of always fell short because she was a female supremacist. She always thought women are better. Still does. Still thinks women are wonderful. So I keep pointing out when she's been unequal. That's how feminism kind of caused us, really, isn't it? The MRM is really a spawn of feminism, because there was a generation of feminists that indoctrinated their children into the idea that the sexes are equal, thinking, because of their patriarchy theory, that this could only mean benefits for them. And then it spawned a generation of people who go, I thought the sexes are equal. Can we stick to the letter of that? We really are the men that Phyllis Schlafly warned you about. So that's why there's a difference. A rational brain can compete with a concept that is rationally based, like egalitarianism. A rational brain can't compete with an argument that's emotionally based, like rape culture. Because that arguments that revolve around the threat of rape aren't about rationality, they're about emotion and panic. It wasn't just the girls at school, it was the press as well. The feminist op-eds in the Guardian and stuff. I'm reading an article called How Men Can Help, and it suggested things like if you're walking home and there's a girl, a woman, walking in front of you, and it's late at night, she's going to be scared, so the gentlemanly thing to do would be to cross the road to make sure that she doesn't find you threatening. And I was at a reverse paranoia. I was paranoid about other people being paranoid about me. So I would, if I was walking home and there was a girl walking in front of me, I'd cross the road so that she'd know that I wasn't following her. And then she'd cross the road, not having noticed me behind her. So I'd have to cross the road again, zigzagging across the road, trying to avoid following somebody. And she'd walk off down the side street I wanted to walk down. Ah, bitch, that's where I want to go. I'm going to have to go a bloody detour now to avoid following you. That's the kind of man I was. One of the other pieces of advice in this article is if a girl ever has to spend the night because she's missed her last bus home or train home, whatever, make sure she knows that alternative sleeping arrangements are available. Yeah, I think I offended a girl once like that, because I think she deliberately went, oh, I'll have to stay. Oh, you know, I can sleep on the sofa if you like. Yeah, no, it's fine. I was raised a feminist by my mother, but I was scaremongered with stories of rape by feminists at school, not by my mother. My mother was quite traditionalist. She would say things like, there's nothing worse than going on a date with a guy who doesn't know when to hold your hand. You know, you're trying to drop hints that you hold your hand, you're not holding your hand. And I'm thinking, oh my god, this is very confusing, because at the same time I'm being told these sort of like affirmative consent things where I don't have a right to hold anyone's hand without them having verbally told me that I can. I don't feel comfortable with the idea of somebody just brushing their hand against mine and hope that I'll grab hold of theirs. I needed verbal consent and all that sort of thing. And then she would say, have a go on a date, and then she'd tell me to walk the girl home, and I go, no, she'll be fine. She'll be fine home. She'll be fine home. She can look after herself. And she go home. I go, oh, I don't really want to, because I know that I'm more of a threat to her than anyone else. Oh, she's more likely to be raped by me, mum, than anyone else. I've seen it statistically. I mean, not specifically me. I mean, I don't tap on the statistics at all, but you're more likely to be raped by your boyfriend or your husband than by a stranger. Therefore, she's in more danger from me than she is walking home alone. So I'm not going to walk her home alone. I didn't actually say that. I just did say, no, it should be alright. It should be on her own. But it was the feeling that I thought she'd feel safer if I wasn't. I never for one moment thought that being a feminist would get me laid. By the time I was in university, I was aware that being a feminist was stopping me from getting laid. And the idea that men become feminists because they want to get laid is a misandrous idea. It's a misandrous stereotype. Everything I do it to screw. It's the only thing that motivates a man to do anything. This is why we don't trust men to be teachers. We don't trust men to look after children, because we think the only motivation they can possibly have to do anything is to get their end wet. It's not true. Men don't become feminists in order to get laid. They become feminists to recover their self-worth and to make up for the sins of their fathers and their ancestors, to prove that they're not like the other men that they hear about all the time. Right, here's a little thing about how cognitive dissonance works in cults. The more you suffer for a cult, the harder it is to leave the cult. Because you've got to justify the suffering. Because you have to justify the suffering would be stupid, wouldn't it, if it wasn't true? So the suffering makes you believe more. Suffering makes it hard to give up the belief. So consequently, the fact that a male feminist probably is screwing up his chances of having sex, that just makes him believe even more firmly that he's right. Because otherwise, why would he have done that if there wasn't a good reason? Why would he have given up the chance of having some sort of sexual release, some sort of intimacy with another human being, if the cause wasn't worthy and just? It's also a very strange claim, isn't it, to say feminists are all ugly and dumpy, but the men that believe them just want to get laid. Why are they so keen to have sex with somebody who's ugly and dumpy? Actually sounds like I'm arguing on the side of the feminists there, doesn't it? But yeah, I will. If you're going to come with a dumb anti-feminist argument, then I say that's a dumb argument. I don't care what side you're on. Don't use dumb arguments.
I can tell you the best these guys ever get is an unsatisfying handy in the back of a car.
Yeah, there's a kind of a problem here. Milo is finding it laughable about them that they can't get laid. That's true. Which actually is tragic. When we say getting laid, it's like throwing it away and making it like, oh, you're so shallow for wanting that thing. It's about human intimacy. It's not a shallow thing to want, is it? Just want to have human intimacy, touch, physical connection with another human being. It's not really a shallow thing to desire. Sex negativity and misandry tend to go together because men are the purveyors of sex, or the salesmen of sex, with the drug dealers. Our attitudes to sex and the people who have sex is analogous to our attitudes to drugs, the people who both buy and sell drugs. And women are like the people who buy drugs, and men are like the people who sell drugs. Like as men do the selling in sex. They sell themselves. And consequently, if you're very uptight and you're very anti-sex, you'll see the drug users, that's the girls having sex, as being sluts, which is equivalent to being a junkie. You know, a junkie that's got no self-respect for themselves. They've lost all self-respect. A junkie, poorly. The sad example of humanity that person is, junkie. But your drug dealer there, your drug dealer's a monster. Well, a terrible person. A terrible person. They've made a victim of that person there. They've made that person ruin their life, or they've allowed that person to ruin their life. And then if you move up the scale and you're slightly more liberal as to drugs, you might think, oh, well, you know, really, they couldn't help it. We're all young once, weren't we? We all dabbled, we all experimented a bit, but those people that push drugs, those terrible people. Because we see men as profiting from it, and we don't see women as profiting from it. We see the sex itself profits the men, because it raises their worth. Whereas all the women get from it is pleasure. Which is alright. Very forgivable to saying, oh, yeah, I thought you were only after pleasure. That's forgivable. But it's like men are getting something more from it. They're getting more than pleasure from it. They're getting some sort of something on their score sheet. And therefore, it's like they're drug dealers profiting from the dependency of their clientele. And you have to have a very, very liberal attitude towards drugs before you start thinking that drug sellers, people who sell drugs, are alright too. That's why, you know, there's these people that will fight slut shaming, but they won't fight creep shaming. Because that would be like sticking up for the drug dealers. Stick up for the drug users. They're not even fun, aren't they? The drug dealers. malevolent people they are. This drug users, drug dealers dichotomy. It's a good way of explaining where we place the shame, because girls are shamed when girls are shamed for sex. They're shamed for having too much of it, whereas boys are shamed for trying to get it at all. They're trying to get it that they're shamed for. And in fact, if they're trying to get it and failing, that's even more shameful. Not only are they trying to do this terrible thing, but they're also failing at this terrible thing. They're both malevolent and failures. Girls aren't failures. Girls aren't malevolent either. They've just got no self-respect. That's interesting as well, is the thing of, girls that sleep around have no self-respect, whereas boys sleep around are told you have no respect for women. And the thing is, of course, the drug dealer always has the supply on him, as it were, whereas the drug user, when she walks away from the supply, she's no longer got the taint of the supply on her person, as it were. Which might be a little bit personal use. Yeah, that didn't really work with the analogy, did it? That didn't really work with the analogy. What do you mean? What's that little bit for personal use? I don't know. Forget it. Didn't work. Okay, that analogy broke down there. Shut up. Let's just get back to talking about Milo, shall we? Firstly, he's implied that they became feminists in order to get laid, which is a misandrous idea. Then he said, what is laughable about them, what makes them unworthy human beings, is their inability to get laid. You're setting up this idea that the worthiness of a human being is dependent on their ability to get laid, and then you're making an allegation that all they want is to get laid. But you setting that up, you're creating that. You're creating that as their yardstick for their worthiness as human beings. If it genuinely was the problem that men were driven to male feminism by the desire to get laid, then Milo is contributing to the environment that makes that a motivation. So what am I offering as an alternative? Because I was talking about actually, sex is rather good, and actually it's quite an understandable thing to want. And I'm also saying we shouldn't be seeing people's worth be dependent on their ability to get it. Yeah, I'm saying if somebody can't get sex, they really deserve pity, not contempt. It shouldn't be, what an unworthy human being you are, you can't get sex. Whole thing, not getting any sex. I was 21. I lost my virginity. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about this. It won't get gritty. I've been in a friendship for years. I was completely in love with her. 2 years. My previous girlfriend, I had a girlfriend when I was 18, and that was just handies and stuff. 168. There was a joke that I used for about 3 years. So I had 68 once. Give me a 68. She still owes me one. So my previous girlfriend had never been really sort of like openly into sex. She didn't talk about her own sexual desire, which meant she wasn't the kind of girl that would give you affirmative consent. Not verbally enthusiastic verbal consent. It's constantly we never had sex. So when I met this other girl at university, and she was bawdy. She was doing the crossword when I met her first time. She came up with an answer that was not the answer to the question in the crossword. She says, but it fits. I said, it's not enough for it to fit. It has to be meaningful as well, Because at the time, double entendre was still acceptable. Double entendre was not yet put on the rape continuum. I think it has been since. I think double entendre is on the rape continuum now. That's not actually quite true. Double entendre wasn't acceptable in certain circles. In fact, the Carry On films have been accused of being terribly sexist. However, the difference is, as I say, I had a rational brain, so I could argue with feminism in the areas where they were using arguments that could be responded to rationally. I couldn't respond to any of the arguments that were surrounding date rape. Date rape was a really scary thing for me, because there was this whole idea that if you rape somebody, that would be their life ruined forever. So you would be very careful not to do it. Very careful. It could happen like that. But no one successfully managed to convince me that double entendre had ever destroyed anyone's life forever in any unrecoverable way. So I thought it was fairly harmless. So I didn't mind dropping a few double entendres. In fact, some of the later relationships that I had, where actually the girl took the lead. The girl took the lead because I dropped a few hints in forms of double entendre that I might be interested. So I think a year or so after I lost my virginity, there was an older woman. I would just say things like, "Oh, I'll place myself in your hands, shall I then?" Things like that. It was like little double entendres that I kind of, I suppose, being deprived of the male role I sometimes took on the female role of being flirtatious in a sort of come get me sort of way. I've ruined this chick's joke now because I went on a segue, didn't I? This chick. I don't want to use her name. That's why I'm calling her chick. Because it's not right. It's her personal life too. You know, somebody might know who it is. I'm talking about. Yeah, I've ruined her joke by interrupting. Oh, just like a man, bastard! By interrupting the flow there by going off on a segue about double entendres and the acceptability of double entendres. So let me deliver the feed line again. It's not enough for it to fit. It has to be meaningful as well, you know. She said, I've never worried too much about whether it was meaningful or not. So I liked her. I liked she was openly sexual. And I kind of fell in love with her. The same way, I was looking for my Julia. My first literary love affair was with Julia in 1984. I was in love with Julia. And there's that bit where Winston says, "Do you enjoy doing this?" She says, "I love it." Oh, that's what the girl I was looking for. The girl would tell me that she loved it, and therefore it would be alright for me to love it too. However, despite my hopes, she wasn't particularly open about her desire for me. Partly, of course, because I was one of these simpy people that were saying, "Would it be alright to hug you?" Yeah, no. Something more. I've been told this recently, actually, not in reference to me, but I've heard 3 women in a very short space of time. It was a couple of years ago, and they both volunteered. Just generally they're talking about their experiences and stuff. And all 3 of them volunteered this piece of information that one thing they've found a real turn off is when men ask permission for things. Oh, such a turn. I can't stand it when men say, "Would it be alright to put my arm around you?" Things like that. Yeah, and that's the kind of approach I was taking with it. And of course, she found it deeply unattractive and probably a little bit creepy. And you know why I was taking that approach, because that's what I've been told that's what I have to do. And it'd be wrong to do otherwise. Don't put your arm around somebody without permission. I do remember one friend, and I think he was just wanted a hug from her. This is a different girl that I'd had a bit of a crush on. I hadn't seen her for a while. I said, "I really feel I want to hug you." She said, "Well, then you can hug me then." She found it really funny that I had to announce I wanted to hug her. I didn't just hug her. Why don't you just hug? What's the problem? Why do you need to ask permission to hug somebody? She didn't understand it. Girls thought it was weird. That's the thing I found. Girls found it weird. As did the girl at university. And the other thing was, so fucking noble. I wouldn't try anything when she was in a relationship. And she was only ever out of a relationship for a week at the most. Because she just went from one relationship to the next. They're all very short-lived. Relationship. My relationship, which is still to come, only lasted 2 months. So, I can't say I was better for her than any of the other men. She just tested every relationship to destruction. But at the time, I was thinking, clearly I'm the man for you. I'm the man for you. I was typical male feminist. Thinking, what about me? So our relationship didn't really develop beyond being a friendship. The closest thing that ever came to it was for a long time, 2 years. One time we were occupying the building as part of a political demonstration against cuts to student grants, and we occupied the university building. And so we were staying there overnight. She said, I don't want to have to sleep down here with all these other people. Should we go upstairs and find a quiet room? Will you come with me? So I did. We put our bedrolls and sleeping bags out on the floor. She did encourage me to put my sleeping bag next to hers. And then she said, no funny business now. So there wasn't any. Because she told me no funny business, so there wasn't. I didn't try anything. I think she expected me to, but I didn't. I still assumed that she was telling me no. The friendship continued just being a platonic friendship until one night, and I was stoned and I was drunk, and I was kind of jittery on coffee as well. I had 3 drugs running through my system at once: cannabis, alcohol, and coffee. And I so much wanted to hold her. And I had said before, I want to hug you, and she said, no, it'll be appropriate. And it was like my arms, I didn't know what to do. I was just going, I don't know what to do. And it's like, I've just got to go, I've got to go. And I left her flat because I wanted to hold her so much, and she wasn't telling me I could. And I wrote a letter saying, I don't think we should be friends anymore. It's driving me crazy. And it started off with an apology letter. I'm sorry about my behaviour last night. This is really difficult for me. I'm struggling because you're not just a friend to me. I'm in love with you, and I desire you, and I have sexual fantasies about you, and it's causing me a great deal of pain to just have you as a friend. And basically, it was a we can't see each other anymore. And then she invited me over that night. She invited me over and basically took the lead. And that's how I lost my virginity. I do realise, of course, that writing a letter like that, the definition of some feminists, counts as rape anyway. That's emotional blackmail, that is. We don't have sex together, we're going to have to stop being friends. That's rape by emotional blackmail. Of course, she didn't see it like that. She was very touched by the passion of it. Particularly an erotic poem at the end, which I'm not going to tell you about. None of your business. My personal life, fuck off.
Women don't want this. They don't. Even those eyes, but they don't. They don't. Now, you're unlikely to get laid if you're part of the sexodus, but celibacy is practically guaranteed as a male feminist.
This is very true. It's one of the reasons I gave it up. And it was kind of the thing of, I can believe in equality and all that, but if I feel I'm doing equality for you, if I'm giving the impression I'm doing equality for you, for your benefit, it makes you seem like a doormat. So I'm an MRA now, but in the 90s, I started proto-MRAing in that I first picked up about, this is completely irrelevant and off at the tangent, but when I was training to be a nurse, one of the nurses was saying, oh yeah, more women suffer from depression, because she was trying to claim that women have it worse, like they always do. And, you know, this was the drudgery of housewiffery that was making all women depressed. And I said, no, more women are diagnosed with depression. She said, don't be so pedantic. I said, I don't think that's a pedantic point. If men don't go to seek help with their depression, they will not be diagnosed as depressive. And it could well be that the reason housewives are more likely to be diagnosed with depression is they're more likely to visit their GP because they don't have to take time off work to visit their GP. So I was already kind of starting to talk about men's rights back in the 90s. And I was opposing feminism on specific points that I felt I had authority to speak about. Because rape was never an issue which I felt I had authority to speak on. That was always the one that feminists kind of had power over, because, you know, you couldn't talk about that because that couldn't happen to you. Even though I had experienced some quite unwanted sexual experiences as a teenager, not what you'd actually call rape, but certainly what you call sexual harassment. But anyway, it doesn't happen to men, so I couldn't talk about it. There was a way around the affirmative consent thing that I discovered, and that was, rather than saying, please may I, or can I give you a hug? That sounds pathetic. If you go, I want to hold you, and then you were offering them the chance to say, that'd be quite nice. Strong statement of intent. See? That was the difference. Rather than asking for permission, it was a strong statement of intent. You do look a little weak, though, if you make a strong statement of intent and they don't give you give you no feedback. And you go, okay, that's one of my workarounds. See, I was looking for workarounds. I was quite ingenious. I'm quite an ingenious chap, really. So I was still looking for the affirmative enthusiastic consent. And I realised I was way ahead of my time, because affirmative enthusiastic consent has only recently become mainstream. At the time, back in the 90s, 80s, 90s, it was only feminists that were talking about affirmative enthusiastic consent. It was only sort of like culty feminists. It wasn't mainstream. It wasn't being taught to students in colleges like it is now. Even most feminists were still on the no is no campaign. They hadn't yet got around to the yes is yes campaign, which made it harder in a way, because it meant that no one has been primed to expect that sort of behaviour. One of the kind of frustrating things about that period, I guess I know this from the girls that I did actually manage to get together with, because, you know, I heard their self-report, really, from them, was the fact that they wound up having to do a lot of the legwork because I was not prepared to put any pressure on. Either thought that I was really slow in picking up on hints, or they thought I was really afraid of rejection. At no point did anyone think, oh, he's really considerate. He's really considered my feelings. He's tried to avoid putting me in an awkward position. He's really considerate in making sure that I don't do anything I don't want to do. Or anything like that. They just assumed that I was oversensitive to rejection. So I didn't get the credit. I didn't get the credit for my consideration, because it got interpreted as cowardice. Including the girlfriend that was with me when I first went into acting. She said, yeah, the only thing I'm worried about you going into acting is I know you don't take rejection very well. And what gives you that idea? Because where she got the idea from was she knew full well how quickly I gave up. One of the things you were taught as part of the whole consent thing was never assume anything, never assume anyone wants you. I mean, if you're going, oh, well, I dropped loads of hints. Yeah, but taking a hint is still making an assumption. I've been taught not to assume. Although it was not 100% successful and had its flaws, I did at least find a workaround to enthusiastic affirmative consent that kind of worked enough. The other thing, of course, I had to work around was the whole doormat issue, and I came up with a solution to that. I could turn everything round. Every point of equality I could turn round to make it about me rather than about her. So I wasn't doing it for her, I was doing it for me. So if a girlfriend tried to do my ironing, I'd say, don't you try and de-skill me. Don't you try and de-skill me. I see what you're doing, you're trying to make me dependent on you. Yeah. Not going to work. It was that sort of thing. I tried to turn it around and always make it about me defending my autonomy in order to act egalitarian in my relationships with feminists without seeming like a doormat. Because, yeah, there's nothing less sexy than a doormat.
Which might be why so many of them turn out to either be virgins, perverts, or both.
Yes, it's true. It's sad. I got into BDSM. I got into BDSM because I did want a domineering woman, because that was the only way I could ensure that I hadn't imposed my power upon somebody, was to let somebody else impose their power on me. And of course, girls don't like that. There's not a big fetish for being a dominatrix. There's not a lot of people that want to be dominatrixes. There's a lot of women that are submissives in the BDSM community. There's a lot of women that want to, be dominated and want to be tied up and want to be spanked and all that sort of thing. There's not a lot that want to be in charge. And you've got to bear in mind, of course, I thought that pornography was full of women that are being coerced into it by awful men. And so I was aware that pornography was exploiting women. So I avoided pornography. Now, whilst there was the idea also that pornography was teaching men to rape, I could trust myself not to be taught to rape by pornography. So, in fact, instead of proper pornography, I was looking at Chris Achilleos art. Should we see some of Chris Achilleos? She's having sex with a telephone. I don't know what that's about. Telephone's a receiver. You don't normally have to worry about who's the receiver, do you? In a heterosexual relationship. And so that was my fap material throughout my teens, because I wouldn't permit myself to look at real porn, because I was worried about the poor girls being coerced into it and exploited. And yeah, the other thing that you could use, and you could know that no one had been exploited in the making of this porn, was literature. And erotic literature is much pervier than porn is. So yeah, I was kind of, as a result of feminism steering me away from pornography, it steered me away to pervier things. While that first girlfriend, who, after she received the letter, she was quite openly enthusiastic after that. In fact, could be quite demanding. The next girlfriend I went on to was again this sort of type that kind of avoided taking responsibility for the sex, and expected me to take risks sexually, which of course I felt deeply uncomfortable with. And to make matters worse, she claimed to have had an experience when she was younger, which was of herself being raped. It's a rather strange story, actually. I don't know if I should go into that. Yeah, so okay, I will. It's kind of a parenthetical segue, but I might as well tell you. Yeah, she said that she'd been raped when she was 16, which of course made me very paranoid about taking any risks with her in terms of making sure that she felt completely in control throughout the sexual encounters in which she was insisting that I was in control. Yeah, it made me very paranoid of her, and treating the whole sexual thing with kid gloves. And then I think it was a few months into the relationship, she said, I think the relationship lasted 4 months. A couple months into the relationship, she said, I'm not sure I was raped now. Well, surely you know. Surely you know. Yeah, that's strange. Her sister started dating the guy that she was convinced had raped her. which at first she thought was a big betrayal, and then she kind of changed her mind whether she had been or not. I don't know. She was a bit mad. She was sort of like self-harming mad. So because I treated sex with her with kind of kid gloves, sex never progressed really beyond 68. It really progressed beyond 68 because, you know, she was not. I got used to a certain ritual with my previous girlfriend, which was at a certain point she would tell me she wanted me. This girl would never tell me she wanted me. So we never progressed beyond that. And then I was saying to my ex, who I had managed to maintain a friendship with, saying she, I don't know what to do. She doesn't seem to want to progress. She said, well, maybe you should withdraw and see what happens. So I did. I made no attempt. I spent the night with her. I made no attempt to make any move with her at all. And after a while, she took hold of my hand and then placed my hand between her legs. And so, as a consequence, 68 took place again. And the next day, she said, I feel you using me. For what? For what? Do you think I am using you? Can you just, I want you to cast your mind back to what happened last night and try and work out what it is I am using you for. She said, I think you better leave. I said, right, I'm off then. And then she stopped me. She returned the debt, as it were. Tried to keep it gritty. The point was, with that relationship, because I felt really paranoid about doing anything that she might find unexpected and that might be unwanted. I'm so worried about taking the risk of doing something that might be unwanted that I tried to get her to take a dominatrix position. I wanted her to be in charge. And she just held me in such contempt. It wasn't a pleasant experience. There was such contempt involved. It wasn't pleasant. Yeah, she just made me feel wretched. Right, so already the timelines got skewed a bit because I went forward in time a bit to talk about when I discovered this workaround to affirmative consent, which is saying I want to do this, and then you state what they want. And then I went back to my second sexual partner, who I tried to persuade to be a dominatrix, and she was just horrible to me, and just thought I was pathetic as a result. So let's move forward in time again to where I'm starting to say I wanted this. The next workaround I discovered was don't say what I want, ask what they want. Say what do you like? Yeah, this workaround wasn't so much a workaround for my feminism, a workaround of their feminism, because the way they were indoctrinated was they felt that if they were doing something for a man, then that was in some way cheapening themselves by giving him what he wanted. Whereas, if I asked them what they wanted, I didn't feel that. I think that worked both ways, but it worked for me as well because I was also concerned that if I asked something, they might go along with it just because they felt they had to. I was worried about that. Now, consequently, as soon as you start asking girls what they like is to be dominated. So they were telling me, "Oh, I like to be dominated. I like to be held down. I like this. I like that. I like being tied up. But." So I went, yeah, I can understand that, because that's what I'd like. Because, and the reason I'd like it was because it would take me out of the position of having to be in power, it was being in power that I was scared of. But of course it did also mean that I could set up safe words. I could get them to tell me when I had transgressed and I'd stepped over a line. So I did wind up in BDSM relationships, not really, because my heart was really far more vanilla than that. But it was my paranoia about consent that drove me to BDSM. Give a bit more explanation here. I'm going to read a little bit of Katie Royf here. Katie Royf's talking to a male feminist, who she calls Peter within the narrative, but I believe she's using false names in order to protect the identity of the men she's interviewing. But what Peter says here is quite key. Peter's obviously come across Catherine McKinnon, or someone like Catherine McKinnon, as indeed I had, in an article in The Guardian, I believe, who has given him the impression that women are conditioned to not be able to say no. On the other hand, Peter does believe in sexual attraction. He says, "Frankly, I don't think sexual attraction to a woman is bad. The feminist community expects that because I'm an anti-sexist male, I'm not going to be sexual. But no, I love being sexual. It's a tough position to be in." And Peter does seem to be in a tough position, juggling sensitivity and sexuality, politics and libido. But feminism profoundly affects the nature of his sexual experience. Peter takes the idea that no means no very seriously. He believes that the dangerous realm of sexuality cannot be governed by ambiguity. It cannot be left to the whim of unspoken consent. He believes that consent should be verbal and explicit. I wonder how this sensitive sexuality translates into flesh against flesh, into sitting next to a girl on the couch. Peter explains that you have to be aware of people's boundaries and space, mentally and physically. Rather than just leaning over and kissing somebody, I always ask them, "Do you really want me to do this? Can I do this? Would you like me to do this?" Because a lot of women have been conditioned not to be able to say no. Peter says that he continues this line of questioning at each stage of sexual activity. So Peter is talking about more than just one no means no. He is talking about, yes, I've really thought this through and I absolutely want to do this means yes. Much easier to convince a guy that a woman has been conditioned to not be able to say no than to convince him that a woman's been conditioned to not be able to give a safe word. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I think it's okay. I think we all know how this works. We've all agreed on it. Don't worry, Catherine. It's fine. It's fine. Get out of my bedroom. Non-physical presence in the back of my head. And of course, once you're in BDSM relationships and they're being submissive, that can be the goal. The goal is to get them to admit that they want you. Getting enthusiastic affirmative consent from them was the goal of the BDSM scene. The thing is, I mean, just like he's going to say about Kameshi in a minute. Well, let's watch a bit more. I want to see, because he's going to say something about Kameshi.
True. Recognize these guys? Now, I should say, Jian Gameshi was cleared of rape, but he is still creepy. And does still have some weird fetishes. He just didn't actually rape. Apparently, the weird things he's into were consensual, but...
So there were confessions that I recorded that were more recent, and I thought, I can't do this, because I know this is going to reflect on people, and people are going to be able to identify who those people are. I can't do this. So I'm going to kind of leave it where it is. In terms of confessions, that's it. Unless I get consent, verbal enthusiastic consent, about doing a fuller version of this. But just to say, when it spills out into your social network that you're in a BDSM relationship and you're the dominant in it, it's not assumed that you're evolving your sex life around delivering exactly what you've been asked for. It's assumed that you are a pervert and you have somehow managed with your twisted mind to bend somebody to your will and get them to do all the pervy things for you. And of course, from a feminist perspective, a man who is a dominant in a BDSM relationship, even if it wasn't his idea, the very fact that he's enjoying it reflects very badly on him and just confirms everything he knew about men. After all, we all know that they just like to be violent and dominating towards women. want to humiliate women and hurt them. Well, yeah, that's not how I got led there. Right, this is already running over now. I just want to have a look at these three men that Milo has presented before us. Okay, so the three men here, Hugo Schweizer and Jan Gameshi, I recognise straight away. I didn't recognise this other guy. He's Richard Carrier. He's a atheist and feminist. His first allegation he made against himself. And in fact, Hugo Schweizer made allegations against himself. The first time I came across Hugo Schweizer was in an article called The Accidental Rapist, in which he talks about a girlfriend who admits to him later in the relationship that sometimes when they have sex, she's not really that into it. At which point he accuses himself of rape. Despite her protestations, going, no, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. I just thought I should tell you. Alright, let's hear Richard Carrier's accusation against himself. What a terrible man he is. At an after-party at a pub after a sponsored event that had an event policy against making sexual advances, after having engaged in fascinating and intense conversation with them for hours, I badly misread her fascination with the subject as flirtatious interest in me, and I told her that I'd like to make a pass at her. He didn't make a pass at her, he told her he'd like to make a pass at her. She was confused and taken aback by that, was definitely not interested, and I immediately realised I'd crossed the line of her. I was worried I'd made her uncomfortable. I immediately apologised. She continued on her own interest to engage me in excellent conversation for several hours more, and everything turned out well. But still, I should have not said that to her. What, you shouldn't have said, I'd like to make a pass at you. Presumably, he told her he'd like to make a pass at her in order to avoid making an unwanted pass at her. I think the self-allegations made by a male feminist should be taken with a pinch of salt because they've already been indoctrinated into the idea that they're predatory. That is, they're more likely to interpret their actions as being inappropriate than they actually are. This conference was to have a no sexual advances policy, but he wasn't at the conference. He was at an after-party. An after-party isn't the conference, is it? So do the rules apply? I mean, there he's making allegations of, I told her that I'd like to make a pass at her. And that makes me, and she was taken aback, and I'm really worried. Bear in mind, in feminism, there's no mens rea. No mens rea is required in whether you're a sexual predator or not. You don't have to know you're a sexual predator. You don't have to be thinking about being sexually predatory. It's not upon you. You can't judge whether you're being a sexual predator or not. Only the other person can judge. And actually, not even that. If you've made that person feel uncomfortable, you're a sexual predator anyway. Even if they don't accuse you. Because even their lack of accusation is not evidence that you're innocent. It's just, it could be evidence that they've been colonized by the patriarchy. Milo's actually aligning himself with feminism against these men. You see, if they weren't male feminists, he would be querying the sexual allegations made against them in the same way as we query the sexual allegations made against, anyone else. But he's ready to believe them. Obviously he admits that Jan Gameshi has been cleared, but he's ready to admit them because they're male feminists, because they're the enemy. He wants to believe that. He wants to go to the rape culture over there. That male feminist rape culture. So he thinks that male feminists are all rapists. And male feminists all think, I'm a rapist. My God, we need to reach out to these people. Not join in with their oppressors to go, yeah, they're right, you are a pervert, and feminism's to blame. The equivalent would be a sort of, a Christian that thinks that they're a filthy sinner and they're going to hell. And an atheist coming up to them and going, yes, you are a filthy sinner and will go to hell for being a Christian. You don't believe in hell. It doesn't matter. I still think you should go to hell. So, aside from having sexual allegations made against all of them, what do these three men have in common? Well, I don't know what happened to Richard Carrier, but I know that Hugo Schweizer and Jean Ghomeshi both had nervous breakdowns and suffered serious anxiety disorders as a result of their belief system. I'm saying the primary victims of feminism are male feminists, and I don't think we should lose sight of their humanity. The thing is, when we're having a good laugh at male feminists, I was unlucky, I guess, because as I was saying, at the school, I was hanging out with daughters of a radical feminist who were feeding me this stuff that was fear-mongering. And I was reading Guardian op-eds because I was, I wanted to be a good feminist. As I say, until about 93 or something, when I dropped the term feminist. But one of the reasons I dropped the term feminist was probably one of the reasons was I knew it made me look like a doormat. And partly it was because I thought I had problems of my own to deal with. And I was aware that there were men's issues that were being undealt with. So I said about the depression, and the fact that men don't seek help about depression. But one of the reasons was I was saying men shouldn't be feminists. Because men can't be feminists. They don't have the authority. Because they don't always like to be a woman. So, which is the radical feminist argument for why men shouldn't be feminists. And I also said it was patronising and chauvinistic for a man to claim to be a feminist. Which I still think it is, actually. I look at he for she. I mean, God, how patronising is that? How sycophantic, patronising and mawkish is that? Anyway, there's a difference between identifying as a male feminist and still being a lay feminist, believer. The thing is, I was unlucky. And in that sense, I was ahead of my time. But while the feminists are doing all this campaigning, teach boys not to rape, they're demanding that the consent classes are put in schools and consent classes are put in colleges. They're teaching boys to be like me. They're teaching boys to have all the sexual hang-ups I had. And to be paranoid in the bedroom the way I was. And I think they're doing boys psychological damage. I don't think we should be laughing at male feminists. I think we should see male feminists as the victims of a dangerous cult. A cult based on guilt. I've got my sons to worry about. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm worried about feminists saying, let's teach boys not to rape, and trying to roll consent courses out to schools. I don't want him to have his brain washed in the way mine was. I want him to have a happy sexual life and have healthy relationships rather than the fucked up relationships I had as a result of paranoid consent classes. Even though my consent classes were not really formal, you don't really get to pick and choose whether they're feminist or not. You can pick and choose whether to identify as a feminist. If you've been fed feminist propaganda, it doesn't matter if you choose to identify as a feminist or not. You're still being brainwashed into feminism. The virtue signalers are the tip of the iceberg, aren't they, really? Virtue signalers, we all can see them. They're all showing off and doing that. Oh, look at me, I'm a male feminist. Oh, look at my teeth. This is a feminist outside. But really, they're just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the ones that are really suffering are the male feminists that are not visible. Ones who aren't doing it to signal their virtue, but to atone for their original sin. Anyway, that's just one blind man for putting on the nature of elephants. Other opinions are available. Cheerio.